All right, and welcome back to another episode of the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and as always, is my beautiful co-host Laraib. As we are super excited to break down all of the NFL Week 15, as we also are filming this after Monday Night Football for the first time this season. So we have now consumed all of the NFL games for this weekend. And boy, oh boy, Larav, was it a NFL weekend? Talk about crazy comebacks, insane endings to games. I mean, if you would have told me that awesome, Commanders Giants game on Sunday Night Football was like the fourth best game this week, well, I mean that's a pretty good week of football. I mean, Colts comeback, the Vikings or the Patriots Raiders ending, which was ridiculous in both for both teams. There were so many great games this weekend, and it's just that part of the season. It's playoff time. There's so much, stakes on the line. So I'm excited to get into this. What about you?
Yeah, not just a great weekend of football, but also football, if you know what I'm
Yes.
saying. So just amazing weekend, like you mentioned. Of course, the Jaguars went in overtime. Just a bunch of playoff implications, Lewis. But I'm sure you're ready to go into the picks,
Yes,
real quick.
sir.
Um, so now you're up one for the remainder of the season, and it really came down to your upset and the Giants hitting, and there was a lot of questionable calls in that game. But it went either way, whatever, you got it. And so, I'll take this one on the chin. Still, 3 weeks left to go, and I'm excited for next week.
I mean, yeah, there were some questionable calls, but the Giants, they got to that position for a reason in which they had a lead late in the ball game. The Commanders, they keep doing this to where they need that last score just to get it in, and then they win on some BS field goal at the end. If you don't have the guy at quarterback, which you do, but you just, you're not playing him, but who cares? I will say it was a very interesting week of picks. It came down to the last game, which hasn't happened that much. And if it wasn't for, with my lock in Minnesota, never a doubt going through,
Jesus.
never a doubt that the dream wouldn't have been alive. But yeah, I mean, got real lucky with the picks. I have a one lead over you at this moment
Yep.
going into the last 2 weeks of the regular season. So this is when they matter. You got to stack them up now, and next week will also be a doozy, Larab. But let's go ahead and start reviewing last week's games, starting with, of course, the Saint Seattle corner. I'll let you start this one off, Larab. Thursday Night Football lost to the division rival San Francisco. Um, what did you make from this game specifically? Because we'll talk more about the NFC wild cards and the implications of what this game meant going forward. But this game in general, is it just you don't belong on the same field with these guys? Is it that simple?
Yeah, I think it is just that simple. Their defensive line, even with just rushing forward, they got pressure on Gino all game long, and as well as Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas were trying to stop, Joey Bosa and Eric Armstead. It just really came down to them dominating us on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the field. Lewis, of course, our rushing defense has been atrocious this season, and it was just Christian McCaffrey running down the throats. And we drop an easy pick in Quandre Diggs, and Brock Purdy does what he does. Easy completions. He only had a couple missed passes all game long, and they were just dicing up our defense. And so that really makes it tough for us to get into the playoffs. Especially with our next couple of games, Lewis, with the Chiefs and the Jets and the Rams. And so at this point, I don't want to say we want to lose the rest of our games, but we might want to lose the rest of our games for a better pick. The Broncos are currently eliminated from the playoffs. And so, if they don't win any more games and we don't win any more games, we're looking bright for some good picks in this next coming up draft.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a pretty good spot to where you don't need to tank necessarily because you do have that Broncos pick coming down the pipeline. Top five pick is going to start looking like pretty soon. Even though Broncos big win last week contributed to the cause.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, you're in a good position regardless of what you want to take the franchise. If you want to make a late playoff push, which is obviously the goal for any franchise, if you're in a situation like they're in, go for it because you're not going to have their pick in the years to come. And who knows if you're going to be able to draft a quarterback this high. So hopefully they take advantage of that Maybe they don't want to take advantage of that. We'll see what happens if you still think Geno Smith is the franchise quarterback. I think he's had a really cool season, but can he be a quality starter in the NFL? I think so. I think he's shown that this year that he could be a serviceable starter, kind of like a Teddy Bridgewater, a guy who he doesn't necessarily lose a game, but he's not going to do anything spectacular to win it. Even though he's had his moments this season and some pretty big spots. But I just think overall a pretty successful season despite, faltering a bit late here. But let's move on now to the Saints portion of this. We beat the Falcons. I said we would. This is a game we get up for. I don't care that, the Falcons get up for it too. What about them? I don't care. We are the better team, and it was at home, and we still almost found a way to lose it in the end. Classic Saints fashion. But, going forward, you got 3 games left, this week against the Browns. You might be able to win. I mean, the Browns aren't exactly world beaters. The defense did play very well against an awful Ravens offense. So depends on what Saints team you're getting. Maybe the Saints guys might get up to face the Deshaun Watson, Saints. Not a big fan of Deshaun Watson. But I think going forward, just have fun this season, boys. Play some spoiler. We do play the Eagles in the later weeks, and we'll get to them. And that game might be a lot easier than we expected, a week ago. So I'm excited to see what happens with that. No, I'm not. But overall, this Saints team, this nightmare season is about to end. So I'm ready when it does.
No, maybe not, Lewis. Only 1 game out from the playoff spot. And, you played this Falcons team with Desmond Ridder looking really, really shaky in his first start, and you almost blew that game, but you still figured out a way to win, Lewis. And so, you still Tampa only 1 game ahead of you guys. And so this nightmare season, as you're calling it, could very well be a success when the Saints are hosting a playoff game this season. But, 3 games left. We'll see how it turns out, Lewis. But like you're alluding to, let's move on to the NFC East. A lot of big shakeups this week. The Giants beat the Commanders. The Cowboys blow the game to the Jaguars, and the Eagles, of course, run all over the Bears. So which one of these teams, Lewis, would you want to talk about first?
Well, let's focus on the biggest winner of the weekend, and that is the New York Giants. And we talked about it, in our predictions about how they've been really shaky in the past few weeks, 0-3-1 in their last 4 games. It just seemed like the Cinderella run they were going on was starting to come to an end. And they're just, their offense was super pop gun, unreliable. You really couldn't trust anybody on the team. Saquon, he had an amazing start to the season, but he was starting to kind of knack up some injuries and things like that were starting to hold him back. But, he had a great game coming out in a primetime matchup. And it was strange because you'd think the Commanders would have every advantage in this game with the extra week after facing them to just focus Giants and then go into the next matchup. Meanwhile, the Giants got smoked by Philly last week. Didn't matter. They come into Washington into hostile territory, win that game. That is super impressive. Yes, we can talk about some of the questionable officiating at the end, and it's been a very bad problem this season. I'm just going to say that straight up. The officiating this season has been some of the shakiest I've seen in a while. There was a lot of bad calls at the end of that Patriots-Raiders game last week. You just look around the league. The Colts-Vikings game, the Vikings almost got screwed, out of one of the greatest comebacks of all time. They still pulled it off, which is a testament to them. But, overall, that's just been a huge problem for the league. So hopefully come playoff time, there's not a insane no call that could potentially, have a team miss a great opportunity in the playoffs. I wouldn't know how that feels. But anyway, yeah, the Giants are my biggest winners from this weekend from this division. I just think this win basically makes your playoff odds double. Meanwhile, the Commanders, it halves that. So huge win for Brian Daboll and the squad. You can't help but be happy for this team and what they faced the past few years. Guys like Saquon, you just root for. Daniel Jones, he played pretty well in that game also. Just playing clean football, not doing too much. And in a game where you don't have to score more than really 17 points to win, just take care of the football and play clean. I just love how creative the offense is. They get so many different guys involved. They're not that great And I think, there's going to be a lot of change this offseason. But for what they do right now, they have a clear identity. And this is a team in the playoffs that they're going to be a tough out no matter who they play, just because they know who they are. And that's dangerous come playoff time when if the ball bounces the other team's way a lot, they know how to use it. They know what to do when they're in those opportunities. So very happy for the Giants.
Yeah, Lewis, and I think it clearly came down to the difference in coaching. Brian Daboll really, really got creative with the offense. Like you mentioned, they don't really have a bunch of playmakers, except for Saquon Barkley. And so for him to go out there and, score with guys like Richie James as his wide receiver and Darius Slayton, just a testament to how the season has gone. Little ups and downs, but they got through it. And now, like you said, they're in the driver's seat to make the playoffs, Lewis. But I want to talk about a different team in the Dallas Cowboys. And they've blown a 17-point lead in this one again, Lewis. And they've had some bad losses this season. And now, the Eagles clearly have the number one seed in the NFC East locked up. Now, are you fearing for this team come playoff time when they have some of these bad losses throughout the season?
You have to, right? I mean, their biggest problem with, they've had a very talented roster for the longest time. It seems like this has been their problem since I've been a football fan. It's in football, the two things you need to trust come playoff time is coach, quarterback, coach, quarterback. And the coach, Mike McCarthy, no one can trust him. We've known that for a while. He's just a big oaf on the sideline who, looking up at the Jumbotron like he's looking at a fly or something on the wall. And you just don't trust him situationally late in these games. If you have a 17-point lead, I mean, if you're a great team and that defense is supposed to be great, then you need to step up to the task. And then quarterback, Dak, obviously he has the intangibles to be a leader. And if he has a great coach around him, maybe he, starts to elevate his play a bit. But just the sloppy turnovers, he hasn't really been able to run the ball effectively this year, as we've seen in past years, really be a threat with his legs. And he's never been that, awesome of an arm talent at quarterback. So come playoff time, we saw it last year against San Francisco. There's late situational football that just gets botched by this team. They're going to be short timeouts. There's going to be a big fumble. Something's going to happen, and this team's going to find a way to lose. And honestly, one of the biggest problems that not a lot of people are talking about is this defense just gave up 34 points to Jacksonville. And yes, Jacksonville has been playing very well recently, but I mean, I thought this was a great defense. I thought this was the calling card of this team. Michael Parsons, Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, you could say, oh, they're looking ahead to Philadelphia. Well, that's BS because now that game really doesn't mean anything because if Philadelphia wins one more game, then they lock up the division. So, I mean, and they're going to win one more game. Please, I hope they win one more game. But so it was just a strange game from the Cowboys late into the season to have so many errors in which you could have won that game in so many different ways. Trevor Lawrence fumbled the ball with less than 2 minutes left, and y'all still found a way to give him the ball back to hit the game-tying field goal and then to throw a pick six in overtime. There is so much wrong with that game. So, yeah, come playoff time, I don't know how you can trust this team, Laraib.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you. And it comes down to situational awareness and coaching. There's a moment in that game in the regular, still in regular time when the Cowboys have the ball left with a minute and it's 3rd down and 10. And instead of running the ball and trying to milk a little bit more clock on 3rd and 10, they pass the ball deep down the field, incompletion, and now you give the offense the ball back with more than enough time to go down and score. So, situational things like that. And the big thing that you hit on is on the defense. It's just whenever they feel like playing really hard, Lewis. Trevor Lawrence has been up and down all season long, but you let him climb back in this game, and it's all because you let your foot off the gas. And you look at this season, especially Lewis, we've seen so many leads blown. Even in this week, 3 teams had 17+ point comebacks, and so no lead is ever safe in the NFL. And it's just on these coaches, Lewis, to tell these players, this game is not over until the clocks hit triple zeros. And so, they're going to be hosting a playoff game this year, Lewis. Or excuse me, no, they're going to be visiting somebody for a playoff game this year. The Cowboys are. And so we'll see what they're made of, especially if they have to face a team like the 49ers or the Vikings. These are going to be really, really interesting matchups. And you have teams like the Cowboys coached by Mark McCarthy, who's looking at the Denny's, menu on the sideline. We'll see when that coaching takes place. But talking about another team in the NFC East, Lewis, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. Breaking news here from the First and Goal pod that Jalen Hurts has a shoulder injury and he may be done for the rest of the regular season. And so Gardner Minshew might be in. I think he's definitely going to be in for this Sunday, Lewis, against the Cowboys and maybe potentially for the rest of the season. But we've seen him play for this Eagles team, Lewis, and we know the fans love him. I love him when he was over there in Jacksonville. He's just an awesome dude to root for. He's in his RV traveling across the U.S. and doing a bunch of weird stuff. But how do you think that will fare for this Eagles with Gardner Minshew in at quarterback for potentially the rest of the season?
Yeah, you think it from an offense perspective, obviously a huge part of their offense was the quarterback powers, quarterback sneaks, moving the pocket. So it's a huge change with Gardner Minshew in, who I believe is a better arm talent than Jalen Hurts. Maybe not as, dynamic of an arm, but just accurate and putting the ball where it needs to go. I think Miles Sanders will get a lot bigger role in the running game along with the other running backs, Boston Scott in that backfield. And we'll see how the offense changes. But I don't think it's that big of an injury, honestly. Like, if this was a playoff game next week, I think he'd be able to play because he did finish that game against Chicago. And it was, he finished it very impressively with a throw to A.J. Brown on the crucial third down to basically ice the game. So I think if this was a high-stakes football game next week, which you can argue it's probably the highest-stakes football game of the season, but because the Cowboys put themselves in such a hole, it's not really competitive anymore because what does it mean for the Eagles? They could basically coast and just win one more game, and they'd be fine the rest of the season. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think the offense will have just new elements to it. It'll be very exciting to see what Sirianni can do with all the tools in his system. So I'm excited to see what he can do from there. So big picture, it might be a good thing to give Jalen Hurts some rest, get him some an opportunity to, avoid some unnecessary hits in these next few weeks. I think it'd be a bad idea to shut him down for the rest of the regular season. And then you have a bye week and then you have to play a game. So he'd miss basically over a month of football. I mean, I think, ultimate rust coming out in that first playoff game. So I hope he gets in either, if he can next week or, the last week of the season just to get some reps in before he has to wait for his playoff game. But I think overall, we saw in that Bears game, it was just one of those things like we saw with the Chiefs, that you're playing one of the worst teams in the NFL. All they're playing for is for that holiday bonus and to get the hell out of the season. And you're playing to keep guys safe, to be conservative, to, focus on our next matchup. All these different things are going through your head. And all that's going through their mind is, I hope I'm playing football next year for this team because they're probably going to do a huge fire sale. Side note, Justin Fields is very good at football, Laraib.
Yeah, for sure, Lewis. But getting back to Gardner Minshew a little bit, it's not like he's stepping into the 49ers offensively, Lewis, but they still have a bunch of playmakers. And like you mentioned, if they get that trio of running backs going and with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith on the outside, I think it'll be just fine on offense. And for the defense, just trying to make it a little bit easier for him, get some more turnovers, get some good stops. But like you mentioned, I think they have this division locked up for sure, Lewis. But let's move on to another topic that we have. We're going to look at the top of the AFC, just top of the AFC in general, Lewis. We saw the Cincinnati Bengals move into the 3 spot after the Baltimore Ravens loss, and the Bills and the Chiefs both look a little sloppy this week. And of course, the Titans, Lewis, are now at 7-7, and the Jaguars are only 1 game back. And so when you're looking at these top 4 teams in the AFC, who are you most concerned about at the moment, and who do you think has the highest ceiling?
Well, I'll say the team who I thought had the highest ceiling that's concerning me now is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, is this just a symptom of you're playing literally the worst team in the NFL on, going down the playoff stretch, and it's one of those games just, hey, get everyone healthy, get everyone out of there, and we'll move on with the rest of our season? Yeah, it might be that. But the bigger note that I want to touch on is this defense for the Kansas City Chiefs has been the worst passing defense in the NFL for basically the entire season now. And come playoff time, it's distressing to see. Their linebackers are slow. They haven't really been able to get a pass rush in the past few weeks. Did not get to Davis Mills at all, except for that last play in overtime. So I guess situationally they're fine. But it was pretty weird seeing Nico Collins and these Houston Texans kind of carve up that Chiefs secondary, which is just uncharacteristic for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. So when you go into the playoffs and you're facing teams like the Bengals, the Bills, the Chargers, the Dolphins, some of these high octane passing offenses, you're not going to be able to get away. I mean, yes, you have Patrick Mahomes and he can win the shootouts, but against these other A1 quarterbacks in the AFC, that whoever gets the ball last wins, how are you going to trust your defense to make that final play when, you haven't been able to trust them all season? So it's going to be a lot on Patrick Mahomes come postseason time. And when you get those game after game after game of him having to play Superman, eventually that's not going to hold up. But I think the obvious answer here is what you're going to hit on next.
The Cincinnati Bengals or the Tennessee Titans?
Oh, never mind. I didn't think you were going in that direction. Well, then let me hit on it real quick, Laraib, because yes, I think the Tennessee Titans are in probably the biggest trouble just from a playoffs perspective. I don't think their ceiling was ever Super Bowl contender. Maybe there was a little part of this season where, yeah, we'll give them respect, sure. But I think now they've been playing really, really bad football. Obviously, that's a tough game to lose against the Chargers last week. Road game, came down to a game-winning field goal. But their offense looked pretty anemic for 80% of this game, except for 2 touchdown drives. And then besides that, they really couldn't get anything going. Ryan Tannehill left the game with an injury for a bit, but he did come back. Yeah, you're only a game up on the Jaguars, who just beat you. And, going the rest of the season, you have a pretty tough schedule. And I do think the Jaguars catch them for the division lead going forward. I think the Jaguars can potentially win out and catch the Titans. So the Titans need to start playing a lot better football, where things are going to get very, very ugly in Tennessee.
Yeah, for sure, Lewis. Just touching on the game a little bit against the Chargers, I know we both predicted that would be a high-scoring game, but it really came down to, 2 defenses trying to battle it out in the end, and my boy Justin Herbert got the best of the Titans secondary and close enough for field goal range to win that game for them. But I want to touch on the Cincinnati Bengals just a little bit, Lewis. I know you said, this Chiefs team is, they haven't dropped that many games this year, but they've been faltering a little bit on defense and offense. And the Bills, that game against the Dolphins was a little bit closer than a lot of people expected. And now you have this Bengals team who's white hot, Lewis. I mean, they're just playing incredibly well on both sides of the ball. They were down a little bit against the Bucs, and they still able to manage to come back and win that game against Tom Brady. And so now I'm looking at this Bengals team, Lewis, only 1 game back from the number 1 seed, and they play the Bills on Monday Night Football in a couple weeks. And so if you had to pick one of these 3 teams, Lewis, to win the AFC right now, who are you picking?
Right now, I think I'm still going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs because I do think and when it's all said and done, I think they went out and they will get the 1 seed. I agree with you. I think the Bengals will beat the Bills. So the Bengals will get the 2 seed, in my opinion. But I think the Chiefs get the 1 seed. And just going to Arrowhead is such a hard place to play, especially come playoff time. And if the Chiefs can get that bye, this is a really tough AFC to where you just want to avoid as many playoff games as possible. So that's a huge advantage for them. But, give respect where it's due to the Cincinnati Bengals, who are just playing great football week after week after week and against good teams too. So it seems like they're going to be playoff ready when it comes to just these close games, finding a way to win. And they looked extremely impressive in Tampa last week. So give all the credit to them, but I still am going to go with the Chiefs.
Yeah, and it's hard to disagree with you looking at the remainder schedule with the Broncos still on there, the Seahawks on there, and the Raiders on there. I know 2 divisional games, and those teams would definitely be trying to play spoiler for them. But you look at this Bengals team, they still have to play the Bills, and they still have to play the Ravens as this final game of the season. And, of course, they've still played the Patriots this week. And so just I think they can drop, or they will drop one, just because the schedule is so tough for them. And the Chiefs, meanwhile, they get to cakewalk in. But I think I really like this Bengals team, Lewis. I know you said you still like the Ravens last week when we did the AFC to win. But the Bengals, especially, for the Ravens without Lamar Jackson, their offense has become really, really anemic, like you said, to start off the pod. And so for the Bengals, I think this is a really, really good season for them. Last year there were those guys who kind of just snuck in. Everybody's really surprised by them. But this year they've really been dominating, Lewis, especially in the second half of the season. And I really like them as Super Bowl contenders.
Yep. And then, their defense as well has been, I think probably playing as the best defense in the AFC right now. And that paired with this Joe Burrow-led offense, who you can always trust, is just a luxury to have in that way. But let's move on to the NFC wildcard picture. So the NFC, we already have 4 teams locked into a playoff spot. Meanwhile, in the AFC, we only have 2. But the Eagles are in the playoffs, Cowboys in the playoffs, and the Vikings and 49ers have both clinched their divisions already. So it comes down to the last 3 teams. We know there has to be one NFC South team, and then 2 other teams out of the mix of the Giants, Commanders, Seahawks, Lions, and the frisky Green Bay Packers, who we wrote off for dead, but did come off a win over the Baker Mayfield-led Rams last night, Laraib. So let's start with the NFC South. Is it a lock? Is Tampa going to find a way to win this awful division? We can stop talking about it. I'll go first. Yes. Your turn.
Yeah, I can't help but agree with you on that one. As much as I love to, pick on you every single week, telling you the Saints can still get in. I think if they just need to win, they're up right now 1 game on everybody else, and if they just win 1 more, Lewis, I think it's basically a wrap. They still play the Panthers again, I think, so that could be an interesting game late in the season. But no, I have to agree with you. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers will take the 4 seed and unfortunately host a playoff game.
Well, they play Arizona next week, and that game, against the Cardinals, probably 3rd string quarterback and Trace McSorley on Christmas Day. Thank you, NFL. I can't wait to see that when I'm opening my Christmas presents. But yeah, that they should win that game, and then they have the Falcons and the Panthers after that, and they can probably find a way to win one of those games. Probably. I'm not sure because they have been playing very bad. I don't know if Tom Brady wants to make the playoffs, but hey, once you're in, you're in. I've seen crazier things happen, and don't bet against Tom Brady. And let's go over those last 2 playoff spots where we have. I read the teams to you earlier, but I'm trying to think. I think you can lock in the Giants with their win against the Commanders. They really help their odds, and then that tie throws a real wrench into the equation when you're trying to do, the head-to-heads and things like that. I think that does get them in. They need to win 1 more game this season. I don't even know if they can get that game, but I just don't think it's going to be an easy task for any of these other teams to really run the table here going forward. But my last 2 playoff teams are going to be the New York Giants and the Detroit Lions, the hottest team in the NFC, playing amazing football. 6 out of their last 7 wins, and the only loss came on that crazy, Thanksgiving Buffalo game in which they really had it in the end against, right now the best team in the AFC record-wise. So I think those are my final 2 teams. For all respect to your Seahawks, and the Packers do have a path to the postseason. If they win out, they have another game against the Lions, so that would put them in the tiebreaker with the Lions. But then you go into some division stuff, and maybe the Lions get it. We'll see how that all shakes out towards the end of the season. But that final, Week 18 game, Packers-Lions, could be a huge matchup for potential postseason progression. But Green Bay at 6-8 would have to win out to have a chance, and they play Miami next week. So we'll see what happens in that ball game, Laura. But it's going to be crazy. Do you agree with my picks, or do you lean in a different way?
No, I definitely have to agree with you. I think the Giants have that 6 seed locked up, and like you mentioned, the Lions, I think they'll get in. Just looking at their remaining schedule, they have the Panthers and the Bears, 2 of the worst teams in the NFL, And of course, like you mentioned, they're the Packers. So the Packers might be trying to play spoiler or even trying to get in themselves. But then you look at the Commanders, who still have the 49ers on their schedule.
Yep.
The Browns, offensively, Deshaun Watson hasn't massaged out all the kinks yet in the offense, but the defense has still been amazing. And then, of course, they play the Cowboys. So maybe that Cowboys team isn't playing for anything on that last game. And so it's really, really interesting to see how this NFC wildcard will turn out. And then for my Seahawks, who aren't completely out of it yet, Lewis, they start to play the Jets and the Chiefs and the Rams once more. So really, really tough for them. We're undefeated against Patrick Mahomes. The Seahawks are undefeated against Patrick Mahomes. So just putting that out there. We'll see how that comes out to be this week. But Lewis, I think that will wrap it up for this portion. But let's move on to Thursday night football. We have the New York Jets we have the Jacksonville Jaguars going to New York to play the Jets. Now this line is at even, Lewis, but I think I know which way you're leaning in this one.
Well, if you guessed it, I am leaning with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know I've already abandoned my Jets ship after last week, after riding so hard for them. But with the really indecision at quarterback right now, whether it be Mike White going to see his 11th doctor to try to clear him, and it's a rib thing, it's a concussion thing. Yeah, the dude's a warrior, and if he plays, I will be nervous for this pick. But the Jaguars have been playing some lights out football, really getting it going. Zay Jones has been awesome. Just this passing game, Trevor Lawrence has been playing like the best quarterback in football the last few weeks. He's first in completion percentage, first in passer rating over the last 7 weeks, and fifth in touchdown to interception ratio, 14-1 in that mark. So he's been playing lights out football recently, and they're winning a lot of big games, and I think they see a path now to the playoffs. Doug Peterson, he's a advanced coach. He's played in a lot of these big games before, and this is a Jets team that, if Zach Wilson's the quarterback, I really don't trust them that much, and I don't trust their offense in general. So Jaguars, they found something in the running game. Maybe this is a big James Robinson revenge game, which if that happens, well, you might as well shoot me dead. But I do like the Jaguars in this particular matchup, Laraib.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Lewis. Just touching on James Robinson just for a little bit. I think the Jets have completely shut him down for the rest of the season, because if he eclipses a certain amount of rushing yards, then the Jets will have to give up a conditional pick to the Jaguars. And so I think they're playing a little bit of keep away from them. Unfortunately, even he's a great running back, so we'll see how he's utilized next season. But I think the big thing you touched on, if Zach Wilson starts as quarterback in this game, Lewis, there's no way in hell I'm picking this Jets team.
No.
Like I said last week, you unfortunately did pick this Jets team. You just calling me, telling me, oh, Zach Wilson has to play well in this game. This is his last shot, blah, 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 blah. He played
decent numbers.
He played bad. They lost. And now even though they're at home, they're going into the Lions Den facing this Jaguars team who's reinvigorated with a Super Bowl winning coach, and they're going to lose, Lewis. I like the Jaguars at home 27-24.
Yeah, I agree with you, Laraib. I like the Jaguars to win this game. Yeah, it's going to be close just because this defense for the Jets has been playing very impressive football, but I do have the Jaguars winning this game 24-17 in pretty impressive fashion. Trevor Lawrence, another masterclass on his part. But Laraib, that's going to do it for this week's episode. As always, our links are in our socials, or our socials are in our links below. If you have any ideas, suggestions, anything like that, don't be afraid to hit us up and check us out on Spotify and YouTube. Our next episode will be dropping on Thursday to go ahead and break down and predict week 16 of the NFL season. But that's going to do it for this episode. Laraib, anything else you got for us?
Nope, that's going to be First Goal Podcast signing off.
Peace.